associates, we did it. We're at the end. This is your final project proposal. So this is the final project. It's a research proposal. Proposals are very common across many industries. Anytime, right, you want to make a change in the company or work on a project, particularly one that's going to take a lot of time, resources, logistics, you're probably going to have to submit a proposal to some sort of supervisor for approval on it. So that's kind of what we're enacting here. So you need to identify a stakeholder in your industry regarding an issue your field faces, and you're going to write a research-oriented proposal on that topic. The goal of a proposal is really, to quickly explain, to the reader, the stakeholder, what's the topic, how you're going to complete this project, and the benefits of completing it, with really a key purpose in, persuading that stakeholder to approve this project so you can get it done and make all this impact in your company and your field. For this report, you can choose either an empirical research or a feasibility report that you're proposing. We talk about both of them in the book, and there's a video, I believe, on it. So pick either one. Just as a refresher, empirical reports answer specific research questions, they test hypotheses, and they're all about primary data collection, right? That's what makes them empirical. It's that systematic, replicable primary data collection. Feasibility reports are more of a technical report, common to some industries, especially if you're in construction management. You may be more familiar with the feasibility report, particularly when it comes to, if you're going to build on this site, or if the city is going to have you, build an underpass. I think they had to do feasibility reports for those. But it can be done for any topic in any field. You can pick either one. But the feasibility report is really considering if a solution, a policy, or some sort of change is viable within an organization, and it measures and weighs criteria. Right? So the empirical, primary data collection, running surveys, experiments, whatnot. Feasibility reports are looking and evaluating if the cost, the space, if the technology, all that stuff is there, so you can actually implement the solution or build the building, whatnot. Okay, so choose either one, and you're not doing the report itself. So, if you have a feasibility report, you aren't actually doing the research to find out if your thing is feasible. You're just writing the proposal, so that way somebody could do the feasibility report. That makes sense, right? So this is that first stage to get it approved so that somebody could go do the research, run the experiment, do the feasibility. Okay, so let me know if you have questions on that. Just keep in mind, right, this is the proposal of, a project, but it's in depth. So tasks that you're going to do. First, determine your issue, your stakeholder, and the best project to confront that issue. So once you have your issue and who you're talking to, then you need to decide, is this going to be an empirical report? Is this going to be a feasibility report? And I have some examples that you can, read through on how maybe I would go about it. The next task is establishing that project method, right? Both types require clear explanations of concepts and variables. So it's kind of like all that sort of background stuff. And I have examples of both empirical and feasibility reports and sort of the types of concepts and variables that are going to have to go into this proposal for me to think about, right? So you can kind of read through those. Give me a shout out if you have questions. And I have a few examples of proposals on Canvas for you. Okay, so then another task, right, is actually your method section. So within that section, an important piece of proposals is actually estimating costs, ethical concerns, and a timeline. So you need to identify, okay, you're doing surveys, like what do surveys kind of cost? Try to do some research, use some critical thinking, try to estimate that, so you can propose that to the person, right? If you are running some sort of experiment that requires lab equipment, like what is that going to cost, right? Ethical concerns. If you're doing a feasibility report, maybe, is there some sort of like environmental ethics at play? Are there residences that are going to have to be like demolished, or, thought about? Like, those are important to think about when somebody is doing this research. Are they going to be disturbing a lot of people when they're trying to get the research and the data? And then, of course, come up with a general timeline. Again, this isn't a timeline for like you writing that report necessarily. It's a timeline for how the report would, the research itself would get done, right? So, for example, if I was doing an empirical report, right, my timeline would probably have to correspond with the academic calendar because it's an education-related topic. So, maybe it'd be by August 1st, have the survey questions ready and piloted, so that way I could give them out in the classrooms on September 1st. It would be open until, November 1st, and then the data and analysis would, take place. So kind of think about, if you were doing this really for a company and stakeholder and proposing it, like what timeline would you put forth for that research? Last task is then to analyze the benefits of the project, right? So you need to explain using a lot of secondary sources, research data, critical thinking, how the project is actually going to be helpful to the industry, all right? So a big thing with getting proposals approved is to persuade the stakeholder, your supervisor, whoever is in charge, to actually buy in and see the benefit and the value of completing your research project. So then there are 5 sections, and I have, some details on them, but basically you have Frontmatter, a lit review, which is like intro, background, your procedures, method section, summary of benefits, and then the back matter. And you need to have at least 8 credible, which means scholarly or trade-related sources. You could potentially layer in, some really refutable newspapers, the major ones, but I really would like you to stake more scholarly and trade. Don't just pull rando websites. There's research on everything, right? You can find any topic through the library, and it's going to be related to your industry and career, so there's definitely going to be some trade journals and work done in that field, so find those. But basically, you're going to justify the topic. You need to use sources to support and justify your research techniques and the benefits. So, Frontmatter, letter of transmittal, very, very similar to the cover letter that you will have some experience in with the job application material. So, letter of transmittal is basically a cover letter for a big report. It provides a nice summary of all the information in the report, identifies the purpose, the key point, the findings, all that good stuff. So the idea is, I get this on my desk, the letter of transmittal's on top, I can decide if I want to keep reading or not. Then make sure you have a title page and a table of contents, right? This is 10 to 12 pages as a report. So a table of contents to help, your stakeholder find the sections they want is really important. Then you have like a literature review, which also includes, your introduction, your background, context, and you're focusing on all the existing research on this topic, with really this aim to like persuade the stakeholders. It's kind of the first half, so 4 to 5 pages. And this, will be / should have been done in your paper in progress. Asks you to write the literature review. Then your procedures method section. Here's where you explain all the logistics of the project. Think of this section as really guide for future researchers to follow, right? So potentially you propose it, it's approved, but then you get maybe a whole research team. They should be able to read the method section of your proposal and like quickly be on board and know how to complete it. Or, let's say you get moved to a different project, right? Your proposal could still be completed based on your method section that you've written. So with that, you need to talk about the analytical framework. So basically, what are those variables and things you're looking at to actually analyze, the data that you're collecting, outline the methods for data collection, or the criteria for the feasibility report, and define any other key concepts in this section that are going to be important for future researchers. And sort of your methods ultimately need to justify the type of report you're proposing. So those would be probably like 3 to 4 pages. But it's robust. You need to have a really nice, clear guideline and sort of set up for how this project could be completed and why. And don't forget to put in, the cost, any ethical concerns, and the timeline. And then lastly, you'll have the summary of the benefits, so that way you can persuade your stakeholder, so they're going to care, who your issue is affecting, who benefits, who might be marginalized, how your stakeholder is going to use the information, all the good stuff to persuade somebody to put money and back this project. Then there's an example. And then lastly, you have back matter, which is going to be your reference list, and then any other appropriate appendices. So with an appendix, think about it like this, right? Anything in the report itself, you are expecting and telling your reader to actually read it. If it's in the appendix, your reader has a choice on if they want to read it. Right? I mean, in that sort of theoretical way, right? Because we know readers obviously always have a choice on if they're going to skip sections or skim. But if it's in the report, it is conveyed to the reader and assumed that this is important and they are going to read it. They need to read it. They need this information. This is the appendix. It's like, this is still important enough to attach to the report, but it's more of extra information for those readers who are like unclear on this point. They can pop back to your appendix and like read more about it. A lot of times it's going to be things like interview questions, survey protocols, extra really like in-depth explanations on a term or concept that most in your field should know, but potentially some wouldn't. A really, really important, study you could summarize back there. Lots of like graphs, tables, things like that. All right, expectations. So 10 to 12 double-spaced pages, right? I mean, it's hefty, but when you think about how it's broken up, you'll have the first 4 to 5 finished for the paper in progress, and then you just need, 3 to 4 and 2 to 3 on the back end. So it will go fairly quickly when you kind of just break it out into these sections, but it is a lot of work. So make sure that you are, working kind of on this all the way along, especially, hopefully the week before where there's not as much due besides your pitch. So just stay on it. There's work to do. We get that. So here's the required elements for it. Cover letter, summarizing the report. That's the letter of transmittal. Table of contents. Make sure it's easy to navigate. At least one graph or chart with critical information. So if it's just decorative, that's just wasting space and ink. It doesn't count. Make sure you have your literature, methods, and benefits section, and then a reference list with 8 credible sources on it. And these credible sources need to have been, cited in the paper itself. So turn an A, right? Meet these expectations with the critical and creative additions we've been talking about all semester that are going to persuade your stakeholder that your proposal, your research, it's doable. Like, I could actually complete this research based on the proposal, and it's actually worth completing, right? Persuade us we should fund it and spend the money on it. And of course, make sure it's polished. So there's a lot of skills that you're practicing, and it's really, as a final project, it's all the concepts of the class coming together into one big project. So you're planning a large project with your industry. You're writing to persuade stakeholders. You're drafting, revising, and editing technical writing. You're finding and synthesizing trade and academic sources. You're distilling complex issues. You're creating graphics and illustrations to express information. And you're thinking critically about your future industries and careers, issues and gaps, and how you could potentially help solve them through a proposal. And the objective is to identify an issue in your industry, persuade others of the importance of it, And again, just develop a persuasive proposal for a really large project, as you might someday do, in your workforce. If you see something is not as efficient as it could be at work, you know what? You have an idea on how to fix it. Write a proposal, get it approved, put the plan in motion. Right? Proposals are great to start these big projects across industries and careers. So again, there's a lot of things going into it, but we will be working kind of through it in little stair steps, and just make sure that you're staying on top of it. And let me know if you have questions. I can look at outlines. I can help get you started. Put up an example on Canvas, and I'm really excited to see what kind of research you all propose. Bye.